Good evening, everyone, and welcome to MCC Theater's Unearthing the Past, a panel discussion and conversation with MCC Theater's Live Labs production of The Things Are Against Us, written by Susan Suhi Stanton and directed by Ellie Heyman. My name is Denise Hughes, and my pronouns are she and they, and I work as the manager of education programs at MCC Theater. Before we start, MCC Theater wants to center our event in the practices rooted in fostering community. We acknowledge how the past and the future converge on our present. MCC's theater home sits on the unceded land of the Lenape people. We acknowledge that this stolen land was worked on by enslaved Africans. May this living land acknowledgement to the Lenape, their elders past and present, and future generations, as well as the experience of enslaved Africans and their descendants, serve as a starting ground for change. In that same spirit tonight, we will discuss and dig into our individual connection to people, places, and the things of the past and the power that inhabit them. I am very excited about this panel. So panelists, please join us on the virtual stage. Hi, all. Hi, everyone. Hi, Susan. Hi. All right. So I'm really excited to be here. The Things They Are Against Us ends in and was inspired by a prompt about a dinner party. So my goal is that we can keep this casual and fun and really make this a conversation about all that this encompasses, right? All the unearthing of our past. I have your bios, but I would just love to hear from y'all. Just give your own introduction of yourself. How would you like to show up today with us? Whoever wants to go first. Ellie, I see your mic's off. Do you want to take the mic?
Great. My name is Ellie Heyman, she, her. I directed this event with Susan, and it was just the best thing ever. How would I describe myself? So I guess I'm a director. I feel like I am a maker. At my core self, I feel like I am a painter with feelings. And I love doing that in the space of theater. And I'm also really interested in doing that in the space of film. And so this was an incredible hybrid opportunity. And I think I'm interested in stories that have to do with catharsis and healing and how can we come together and release. But I'm also interested in having a good time and in making work that is for so much more than just people who often think about themselves as going to the theater. I really am obsessed with really smart work for a popular audience. And so I think with all of those things, it's pretty clear why I then fell in love with this play. And now I'm gonna mute myself because I've learned what happens if your mute is off.
Gotcha. I think that's great. Susan, can you take the mic?
It's a good question. I guess I would say at my core, I'm a storyteller. I'm very interested in just trying to find different ways to show the world, sort of like make people see things in a new way, that things can be stranger than they appear, or just calling attention to just kind of like the wonder of things, like big or small, and playing with some of that. And I guess like Ellie, I'm interested in a number of mediums, including art. And so I love how we could fold in just different kind of elements into this production through our amazing design team and like everyone's fantastic imaginations, especially Ellie's. So happy to be here. Thank you.
All right, Christian?
Hi, I'm Christian Cadrigal, or Christian Cajigal, depending how well you know me. My usual joke is depending how you voted. I live here in Daly City, California, just outside of San Francisco. I live part-time in Brooklyn, except since March, for obvious reasons. I've been here. I'm an actor, magician, storyteller, and professionally magician and tour guide. I've been paying my bread and butter has been the San Francisco Ghost Hunt walking tour, a haunted history walking tour in San Francisco, the longest running. I helped create it 23 years ago. It's been mine since the past since 2016. It has helped to fund my life in New York and doing magic out there. I don't consider myself one or the other. I consider myself all of it. I use all my skills to make all of it happen. I should probably say up front that I like to call myself the agnostic for the true sake of atheism. And I'm an atheist who loves haunted places. I'm the atheist who runs a ghost tour. And I love feeling ghosts in the room. That goes into my own complicated business. But I've always done what I can to try and like mix theater and magic and storytelling as much as possible. Because to me, everything harkens back to a shaman around a campfire who might do a magic trick and tell you a story and a little peyote and transformative experience. And I try and bring a little bit of all of that to everything that I do.
Thanks, Christian. Sarah?
Hi, I'm Sarah Chavez. She, her, they, whatever you feel like using. I'm comfortable with it. Now's the time of the dinner party, whether you're either going to be freaked out and not want to talk to me for the rest of the night, or you're really going to want to talk to me and tell me a story. My work has to do with death. I am the executive director of a nonprofit organization called the Order of the Good Death. One of the founders of something called the Death Positive Movement. I also co-founded an organization that focuses on decolonizing death called the Collective for Radical Death Studies. Before this, I was a museum curator and the historian of a cultural landmark in Los Angeles. And very much what drives my work and all of these, like the intersections of all of these things that may seem unrelated, is very much storytelling. Every object, every location, every human being has this wondrous, amazing story to tell, including the ghosts that inhabit those places and that haunt the people. So yeah, I'm here to talk about that uncomfortable subject, death, but I'll make it fun.
I'm really comfortable in it, so I'm ready. I'm really excited. I love it. And last but certainly not least, Victoria. So glad to have you back.
Hi, thanks. I'm Victoria Liberatore. Nice to meet some of you and see some of you again. And I'm already having the best time. I pulled a card before we started and I got the eternal child. So when Ellie mentioned, having fun, and this, by the way, is from the Kim Krantz Wild Unknown Archetype deck. So defining myself, she, her. I'm in Los Angeles County in a place called Monrovia on Tongva land. And I would say if I were going to define myself, my last name means one who liberates. And that's what I try to do in all my work, be it the intuitive readings, energy work, spiritual work, my performance and writing work, of that liberation of the spirit, and especially when we deal with our own limiting beliefs, be them inherited or, brought upon from experience or however we've come upon them, to help people release those so they can really be empowered. And I also love storytelling and things that go bump in the night, even though they make me jump. And I also did magic many years ago at the Mystery Castle in Columbus, Ohio. So great to be here. Thanks.
So many interwoven connections with everybody. I love that. So that made me think about, for Ellie, last October, you took on the mammoth challenge of creating, with an incredible team, The Great Work Begins, Scenes from Angels in America, where you developed this hybrid type of theater that also included film, like you were talking about earlier. And we also had that amazing blend in this play with The Things They Are Against Us. And for me, it really took me back because I was like, I've never seen anything like this. And then when I saw The Great Work Begins. So both of those, my question is, both had moments in my experience that felt otherworldly. And I know technology can be funky sometimes. So I was wondering, were there moments where either in the process you felt connected to something greater than yourself, or did any of that energy come into play?
Yeah, Yeah, that's such a wonderful question. When working on The Great Work Begins, which is 7 scenes from Angels in America, and it had over 100 collaborators to make it happen, and it was filmed completely remotely. One of the things that was wild was, for that piece, it felt really, we used, it's a similar spirit that made both shows, but the technology and the sort of a physical approach were completely different. And for that show, we were composite editing people into the same physical spaces, but we weren't editing in the way, in like the really expensive way where like you could like cut me out and spend a lot of money doing it and then put me anywhere. We were doing it like, like if you see, I want to go like this. If you see there's like a line, right? Okay. So you see that line in my wall, you could actually cut it and put it in a way that, and then if I started talking this way, like you could actually do it in a way where it starts to make it look like two people are in the same exact room. If the scale is literally perfect. And if like we're matching like the light on this person in their room and then the light on this person in their room. So it looks like the same spaces. And then we were staging it. So if this person goes this way and this person goes this way, then they have to turn their head here to look at this person. Like, it was wild. But so they had to trust me to basically explain, and they were both, we had a platform called OpenReel, but it's as if it was Zoom, but it was just different recording technology. They had to trust me to explain sort of where their other, co-scene partner was. But then here's what's crazy. Once they took a leap, they were all such amazing actors that they could start to feel each other. And I've never seen anything like it in my life. And they didn't believe it was happening, but they started acting in a way where I was seeing my monitor was one square here and one square here. And suddenly it looked like they were completely in the same room. Like they would lock in and someone would like, it was a scene with Glenn Close and Esapatha Murkerson, and like Glenn like just like moved her face and Amitha just like snarled. And it was not, they could only hear each other. It was a non-verbal thing, and they both reacted. It was like they energetically aligned. And then as soon as the scene would be done, they would be like, what just happened? Like everyone, they'd be like, what just happened? I'm sure that was terrible, because they had to sort of make bold choices and trust. And I'd be like, guys, it's good. Let's do it again. And like, no one believed me. And then they saw the thing, and it really does look like people are in the same room. But I swear there was something like, I think Apatha was in Seattle maybe, and Glenn was in Montana, but they were like energetically beaming, and it felt palpably connected.
I love the unexplainable. It makes me really excited when it feels like something else is at work. So yes. Okay, so I had another question, because Susan, you set the play in Spreckelsville, Massachusetts, on Spreckle Street. And when we talked to Christian, he gave us insight into Spreckelsville and revealed this really interesting story. So I wanted to see if Christian can tell it, and then I wanted to check in with Susan about what brought out Spreckelsville, and did you know about the history of Spreckelsville? Like, bring it over to both of you.
I'm gonna guess she did, because I just filled it out for myself recently. So on my walking tour, which is in Pacific Heights, which is like old 1800s rich money kind of mansions, there's the Spreckels Mansion, which links back to the Spreckels family, which were basically Sugar King of Northern California, and did lots of importing of sugar from Hawaii. There's a Spreckels, California, in Monterey County, which we all seem to know as Steinbeck country. And so to discover that there's a Spreckels Street in Honolulu and a Spreckelsville in Maui, which was also another company town of the Spreckels empire, I wondered, is it something about like the trapped ghosts of the Spreckels family somehow? Or is it the ancestors of Hawaii trying to reach past everything the Spreckels empire and all white capitalism did to the rest of the world? Oh my goodness, what does all of it mean? And so that was my question for Susan.
Yeah,
I think you're the first person to call me out on that. Like, well, well noted. I'm like really, really impressed. That is correct. That's the origin of Klaus Spreckle. Also, I think just the idea, I mean, also just the German, I think it's also, I think maybe this is silly, but it's kind of a hilarious last name. Like it's a little cute, but kind of ominous. And then I think the idea of like that there's always a German word and just the origin of that. So, I mean, I think this play especially is about playing with things that are deeper and then things that are a little bit silly or absurd. And so, it's a bit of a mashup, but yeah, really, I'm so impressed. I can't even totally answer the question because I'm so impressed that you spotted it.
It's only because I got the Spreckles mansion like very close to my walking tour. I'm like, Spreckles? Wait a second.
Love it. I love when it connects. Great. So the things are against us is also really centered around this house. So for Victoria and Sarah, I had a question about the cleansing of space. Because one of my initial reactions with the play was, no one cleared that space when they came in. We had all that energy in there. We had the woman that died, like the aunt that died. So just wanted to get your insight in both of your work around how do we clear energy for the spirits that might inhabit places? And with that, is there a ritual practice you recommend? And does that shift according to one's own personal lineage, history, or the history of the location? Whoever wants to take the mic first can.
I'll go first. So this is really simple, but honestly, it's meaningful. Cleaning, really cleaning. For my ancestors, for Mexica people, it was cleaning was really a sacred ritual. We don't have that colonized view that we have of cleaning, that it's something that is a task, that it's a burden. It's not worthy. It's something we hire someone else to do, so to free up our time to do something else. Cleaning can be a ritual. Something that I really, really loved throughout The Things Are Against Us is the theme of water coming up over and over again, but water as this cleansing agent, as this life-giving element, tears as a form of healing and emotional cleansing. And how much they're connected to death and communication. Almost every culture washes the dead body at the end of life before we prepare it for burial or for further rituals. It's always the bathing, it's the cleansing of the body, and the cleansing of our spirit. So that water element, I think that's really important, and to really try and reframe cleaning as an important ritual for your space.
Thank you for that. Yes. Victoria?
I have so many thoughts. I mean, one thought is sometimes it's not for us to clear space, especially if we're traveling through. Like, we can just be good guests and be respectful of whomever's in the space. I was in New Hampshire with a friend, and we were staying somewhere, and she was like, I know my room is haunted, and what do I do, Victoria? And I was like, well, tell them, that you're just here for the night and you appreciate a place to sleep. And she was like, that's not what I wanted to hear. I wanted you to tell me ghosts are not real. And I was like, well, you're talking to the wrong person, So not every space is to be cleared. I also feel like sometimes when people come to me for readings, there can be a lot of fear of like, oh my God, I have an energy attachment or something, there's this negative energy, or I have a block. And my mentor, Carolyn Swift, always emphasizes we're all one. Like we're all one, and if you believe in the divine or the universe, like we're all the stars, we're all in this together. So to kind of take out that idea. Now, that being said, some places I've walked into, and I'm like, you know, it's like I just do not feel welcome. And so, and I think, you know, the house in Spreckelsville would be one of those. So if I were, I probably wouldn't move into that house, quite frankly, because it's bigger than a clearing. But you know, whenever I'm coming to a new place, like, you know, we moved to this home from the 1920s 2 years ago. I connect with it. Everything has energy. Everything has an electromagnetic field, you know, and so I connect with it and see how it's doing. And then if something, especially for like New York City apartments, where there can be so much energy passing through, I really like using sound, because we're not just talking about spirits. We're talking about the energy of, if you've moving into a place where there was kind of like in the play, like a lot of, well, there was more than fighting, there was violence. But, you know, if you're moving in somewhere, or if you have neighbors above you that fight a lot, you know, what is it to like imagine like an energetic mattress above you? It really does work to kind of do that. But I love to clap out the corners. I do that in my place because this office is very busy. And so you start at the bottom, clap up the corners, and you're just getting rid of the dust bunnies, residue, clapping it out, ringing of bells. You know, if you're comfortable using any kind of scent or support with that. I agree with Sarah. I think just cleaning, water, prayer, and of course, thank you. A thank you to the space.
Thank you both for all of that. So Victoria, you were actually introduced to us by Ellie. So I'm curious about how you two met and what that origin story was. Victoria, you hosted a fabulous event with us a couple of weeks ago where you did some intuitive readings for some folks, and also led a grounding meditation for us with connecting us to our roots. So yeah, if we can just hear a little bit about your connection to each other.
I would love to start with this. I think Victoria is amazing and the real deal. And my wife, I guess you've known Lucille for a while and had readings, and like I had been hearing about my wife's like spiritual reader for like a while. And then I was like feeling, I don't know, just sort of in this pandemic, really trying to like ground in myself and like come into like myself and the best self I can be. And I had a reading with Vic, and it was just really transformative. And so many things you said resonated in so many ways and actually shifted some of my like daily practice in my life. And it was huge. So then I did the thing that I do, which is that then I called all of my best friends and told them, many of whom then just immediately went to Vic, and all had the same really powerful experience. And so that's, I guess, like, I just am like, you know, just really grateful. And also excited to know somebody who, I'm spiritual, but I don't have nearly, I don't feel like I have as tangible of a connection. And everything you said was so real and true. It resonated so truthfully to me that it feels exciting to me to know someone who has that kind of Rolodex.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Sally. Yeah, it's always an honor to read for people, and the goal of the readings is whatever's for their highest good. So it's going to look different for everybody, you know. And listen, I'm very flawed, and I was just having a little spat with my wife earlier. So, you know, I did the pandemic, we're fine, but like, I don't, you know, I'm very human. And sort of what Christian said about being, you know, I'm not agnostic, but like, there'll be times I'm doing energy work and I'm like, what the F am I doing? You know, and I've talked to my mentor about that, and she's like, that's great. You know, it's great to have doubt. It's great to have doubt because it keeps us from thinking that we're all knowing about anything. But it's always a great honor to read for people because it's so intimate. It's really very, very intimate for everybody involved. So, yeah.
Great. Susan, I wanted to chat to you about this version of the play and that you adapted to Zoom. So I was surprised at how the script actually read almost like a ghost story to me. For the audience, and also for some of y'all, like there's pictures incorporated. It was like a very visual map. And I was wondering about that adaptation. Did you and Ellie work on that together? What was that process of creating this experience condensed for the virtual presentation?
Yeah, I mean, it was really tough, I think, because in part, it's all these interwoven stories. It's very absurd, complex play anyway. And then when you kind of shorthand it, and I think there were certain times where I'm like, oh, I really want this payout, like especially with Lorca, or just certain things where it's like everyone's being drawn to the house. But the beginning, it's kind of like this epistolary story and all these things, and then it kind of, like the train, it speeds up, and then it has that second part. And so I think our big discussion was like, well, first of all, how do we excerpt it, and how much can we fit into sort of like the vessel of this forum, and how can we be successful at it? And so Ellie and I think like I did a pass, and then we kind of like went back and forth and tried to figure it out, and then like took away a couple of like trimmed down some things just to allow more space, and then we kept, I guess, the first scene of Act One, but then didn't have time for the rest of it. So I think it was meant to be sort of how to keep the door open, because I think when it was some different cuts, it felt like, oh wait, this is the ending, which it wasn't meant to be. And so it's kind of like, can we be tantalizing or suggesting that here's part of the world, but it's not the entire story? And how can we sort of at least pay out what some of these relationships are, kind of give a taste of the different worlds? So there was one version that kind of ended at the end of Act One, which is like Tessa getting consumed by the shadows of the house. But then Ellie had an idea of including the beginning of Act Two, which is a very different flavor. And so I think that I felt like that was really fun, because in a way it's less neat, but it also kind of gives a sense of what's to come in a way that I sort of wanted to share with audiences, and also just play with stylistically with the design.
Awesome. Yeah, it was a lot of fun to go through and then to see come to life. Christian, I want to talk about your journey with these ghost tours. I know I had asked if there's any places that you would not go, or if you like to the question of, is there a story that you feel really pulled, like that you feel people really resonate with on those tours? Because these spaces are so interesting. Can take
resonate in which way?
That people feel really compelled to like want to know these stories, like a specific story. Is there a story people really love?
I mean, I came to the tour because a friend of mine was creating it back in 1998. I was still in college getting my theater degree and doing magic, and he was like, wanted my point of view on kind of how to make a fun, entertaining haunted history tour, because typically most walking tours are like blah 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 blah, and there's a clipboard, right? But I did research for him, and I used to work for him back then. I just started falling in love with the whole thing and going into the haunted hotel, and again, as the non-believer, feeling the haunted hotel and loving that. And I went off with the rest of my life, and then Jim decided to retire 2015, 2016. Susan, he's retired in Maui right now. So everything's connected. And it's been mine since 2016. Since I have been now the curator of it, and sort of feeling like, because most of these stories are pretty well based in historical fact and actual human beings, not just kind of vague legends, although I think that's legit enough for a ghost tour as well. And so and most of the ghosts on my tour turn out to be women from the Victorian era. So suddenly I feel like a responsibility to really get these stories even more right. And the one story that like resonates with me, where people really want to learn more, and she has been on the tour since day one. But in the past few years, people are finally really paying attention, is that of the story of Mary Ellen Pleasant. The way I describe her, if you took a millionaire, Marie Laveau, and Harriet Tubman and rolled them into one human being, it's Mary Ellen Pleasant. And that does get into some complicated stuff, because she may have had a nefarious life. Even her best biographer, who is not happy with me and my ghost tour, talking about Mary, even says she might have killed a husband or two. But she used her power to fight slavery and racism. And so it's really like I've been sensitive to the idea that at first blush you don't know what ethnicity I am, you don't know what point of view I'm coming from. You're just seeing a dude tell the story, a lighter skinned dude telling the story of this mixed race Black woman, and the good and the bad that she may or may not have done, and all the demonization that happened of her. And so I've tried to really do more research and try and get the story right. But the problem is she wrote 3 memoirs and none of them match. And she said, that's okay. Basically, her point of view was her stories don't have to match. She was okay with obscuring her own life story. She leaned into the demonized legends that people created of her to do her work. And that gets really delicate for me to have to tell to people who are just looking for a nice night out and a date, out in the cold, and be entertaining about it in 15 minutes before you totally freeze and we have to keep moving. So it's this juggling act of history and representation and date night, and you've been dragged on a ghost tour and you really hate this right now, and you're cold, and keeping it all entertaining. And but by the end of it, everybody, especially in the past few years, where people are really now finally paying attention to the stories of people of color and of Black women, now these days people are like, oh, tell me more. And it's great. When I have, in the fall, I tend to get more locals and tourists. And I love it because I'll have natives natives to San Francisco who never knew about Mary Ellen Pleasant. And sometimes that's when the story becomes 30 minutes long, because I want them to know as much as humanly possible. Mary Ellen is my absolute favorite character in California history, and probably at this point in American history. And she's the one people want to know more about all the time.
Awesome. I will need to look her up some more.
Please do.
In that vein of really unearthing all the stories of our past, not just the ones that are written by the people that often will write history and have a lot of money and wealth, I wanted to bring it back to you, Sarah, about the decolonizing death culture and really talking about America's relationship to death. I feel like America has a very compartmentalized relationship to death. So I'm really interested in hearing more about your work in shifting that practice, and also in your visions of the future. What does our decolonized approach to death look like?
So I love this question. Let's see if I can answer it properly. It's having one of those moments where it all makes sense in my head. Can I make the words that come out of my mouth connect to my head? Connections. So let's talk about the word decolonization first, which really essentially at its core refers to land, native land that was colonized and taken, and there's a movement to return that land to indigenous people who originally inhabited it. So my argument here is that decolonization also applies to death, because the borders that are created in our physical land through colonization, they've also been created between us and our dead. Excuse me. So here in the United States, primarily, we have this very commodified, $20 billion funeral industry that says that, this is how we do things. We create the laws, the regulations. We've created a tradition of an industry that's really only existed just a little bit after the Civil War. Before that, we cared for our dead at home. We buried them at home. Our loved ones typically died at home. So now you think about the dying process, we're very removed from it. Someone dies and we no longer know what death looks like. We're afraid of the dead body. We think that we've been made to believe by the funeral industry that it is a danger or a health hazard. It's not at all. Dead bodies are completely safe. We've taken care of them for almost all of human history. You have to mourn, and that you have to ritualize, in a couple hours in a rented church, and then hurry up and get back to, being part of the the machine of making money and generating money. There's no room for us. Whereas in other cultures, there is that continuing relationship with the dead. We spend time with the dead body. We continue to have a relationship with them, and a consciousness, and continue communication with them. We have ancestor rites and rituals throughout the year. For many cultures, every week. But colonization has really put this hard and fast border between us and our dead. And so I'm really trying to encourage people to reclaim that. That border is something that colonizers put there. You can step through it and have a much richer, more meaningful experience if you throw all of that out, because you don't have to do what an industry is telling you to do. You have a lot more freedom than that.
Yes, Sarah. Yes. That makes me want to ask you all a question about your relationship to your ancestors and your relationship to land, and how that impacts your craft. I'm just curious about that for all of you. Sarah, I know it was also connected to like your beginnings, right? But I did want to open up the floor for everybody. I know that may be a lot to process, because it might take a little bit to process. But leaving the floor open, whoever wants to take it first.
Well, thank you, Sarah. That was beautiful to hear more about. And I'll just say that I feel like everyone is intuitive. It's a sense that we all have. Not everyone may be able to see or speak or hear, but we all have a sixth sense, and it works in different ways as far as the pathways. And when people have come to me, specifically to mediumship, wanting to connect with loved ones that are on spirit side, I really feel like we all can. And of course, it's lovely, to get a confirmation from somebody else, to get a name or a description or something. And it's like, oh my God, it's, they're there. And there are the other 364 days in the year. And like, I'm like, you can talk to them. And, it goes back to the eternal child. It's why kids are so intuitive. Like, they don't care if it's real or not. So it's this idea of like, oh, if I'm talking, my mom is deceased on spirit side, and I'm in this line of work, and I'll have moments of doubting myself. When it's just the two of you, it's like, how do I know? And you just really have to trust your heart with it, is my opinion. And if you feel like they're talking to you, talk back, have a cup of tea with them. I think writing is a great place to connect. And it's something that, to answer your question, Denise, that I've been doing more of with my own relatives. And not only, it's so nowadays everybody talks about, the trauma in our lineage, which is real. We all have trauma in our lineage. I was talking to my wife about the toilet paper thing when the pandemic started, and how there was no toilet paper. And I was like, in this country, the Great Depression was not that long ago. Like, we all have this collective trauma of that, right? But then there's all the gifts in our lineage, and that we can connect with the gifts in our lineage as well, regardless of what else is there. And that's something to access in your energy system. And I'll just close my little part by saying, like, we have so much in our energy systems available to us, and we don't grow up usually learning about them. And that's another place to really connect with your intuition and ancestors. So seek that out if it's something that resonates for you and lights up. Thanks.
Thanks for that. Anybody else want to take that? The connection that the stories of your ancestors play and how you approach your craft.
So for myself, my ancestors are my family. It's something that I thought of immediately while watching the play too, was this, and I'm going to completely misquote this quote from author Angela Carter, about how our bodies are a house and our ancestors, they look out through our windows, the eyes, that I'm not alone in my body. All of the disabilities that I carry, my hair color, my eye color, my long fingers, all of these characteristics, but also the traumas and the joys we carry. We are not ourselves alone. We carry these things. And we talk a lot about self-care in our society, and I'm terrible. I'll eat chips for lunch, but if you come over to my house, I'll make you like some fabulous meal. But I don't take care of myself very well. So something that really connects me to my body and caring for it is that when I care for myself, I feel that I'm also caring for my ancestors in this way. But also the choices that I make about my body at death and after death are really important. I want what happens to my body after death to be an extension of the values that are important to me in life. So, for example, all choices are wonderful and great. Let's get that out there. Whatever is meaningful to you, whatever is important to you, if it's a golden casket, then please, I can't wait. That's awesome. I love it. For me and this idea of decolonization, burial in land, on this land is just not something that feels good to me. So whether that's cremation or something new that has been legalized just in the past year, is something called recomposition, or you may have seen it in the newspapers, they're calling it human composting. So again, it's really just accelerating our decomposition process and becoming soil, so that I'm not taking up space and I am giving back to the earth and the land that nurtured me and my life in some way. So that's kind of my very long story about that.
On the surface, a lot of my work, especially if I'm doing more of my solo magic shows, they do have family history involved. And, on one end, I have family history that goes back to, rebels and escaping Franco in Spain. On the other side, I have somebody who was my mother, who was essentially trafficked from El Salvador. And I'm just starting to really kind of bring that into my work right now, or really realizing that a show I did 10 years ago was about that, and I never knew that. So my ancestral everything kind of sneaks its way into the work, on the surface at least. But I feel more that everything I do, that we do, is just ancestral. I don't believe art is prophetic, and I don't believe that history is a cycle. I just think people never change. Just the toys we get change. And we're still kind of telling the same stories over and over again, constantly trying to remind ourselves and each other about our humanity, to not hurt each other, how to love each other. And so everything I do kind of always links back to that, trying to remind myself, this is This is my job. I'm one of the people, for whatever reason, whether it's the universe, the spirits, or just personal inclination, my job is to continue this lineage of people who are there to remind the rest of society how to be a person with the rest of the world. So that's my take.
Susan, I saw you.
Oh yeah. I think that the nice thing about being a playwright is that we can just write up imaginary dialogue scenarios, and so we can sort of talk to our ancestors. I'm really interested in not only honoring, but also I think kind of in line with what you were saying, Christian. There's something about just reminding people that people, you look at an old photograph, or you think about somebody from an older time, and there's something very formal about it, or you can't imagine it. And Victoria, you mentioned the Great Depression, and I mean, there's something ineffable about the past, where it's like we don't know what it was really like in terms of the plague, right? But now we've been through this, and then in 100 years or more, people will talk about this time and not understand the experience of it. But it's still kind of like, yeah, like people weren't necessarily different, and so in a lot of ways, in terms of their humanity. And so I'm really interested in investigating the humor and just the particularness of that historiography of just normal people that are sort of caught in the wave of these larger seismic events, and feeling, like, what does it look like to be sort of like a Victorian spinster, and playing with those ideas. Or, I went to a graveyard in Savannah, Georgia, and it was Civil War soldiers had camped out there, and they had defaced some of the tombstones. And so they made some people like 1,000 years old, or some people 3 days old. I mean, it was a terrible thing to do, but at the same time, it reminds you, it's like, these were the equivalent of sort of like high school teenagers, like some of these people were like 17 years old. And it just reminds me of that when you look at a picture and just trying to sort of recreate the spirit of that. And so I think for me, it's a lot of conversations. And I think in terms of lineage, I think like a lot of people in terms of American stories, like my family, I think a lot of us, like our families have come from different places. And so some of these lines are broken, or some things are are lost, or there's a sense of like, we can't follow all the lines to all the places that we want to. I know that Elliot and I, even before this play, we've talked about just sort of like inherited traumas and just the ways to process and finding also like the joy and the fun and the humor in it as well, in terms of like what to take on, and like also what to release,
Yes, for sure. In that same vein about what we take with us and what we release, Victoria, can you speak to what we can actually carry in our energy systems from our ancestral lines, and how it can impact our life, and like how we can attune to those energies?
Well, any and everything. I mean, I've been doing this work, like I said, for about 15 and a half years. And about 10 years ago, I got attuned to Reiki. And it's when I got attuned to Reiki that I really started to experience energy in a new way, where if I have somebody sitting across from me, I'll get this little alert, like often it's in the root chakra, and I'll hear the word fear. And then it takes me into 3 generations back, the family farm was on fire, right? And so, I mean, it's the idea of like epigenetics. So you, at this age, have not experienced losing everything in a fire, but it's showing up in your energy system. So what do we do about that? Sometimes you transmute it, sometimes you release it, and it all really has to do with intention. I find that like a little bit of study and you can really start to tune into your own energy system, because it is your energy system, right? And then when I do this work, it's the ancestry and what's there, and then also I believe in past lives. It's what you may be carrying energetically from other lives that you've brought in. There was some story that was just passing through that I wanted to share that has left. Oh, the other part I'll say is just even in our own timeline, our energy. So I know in part in relation to the play, we're talking about our ancestry, but there's also, I find I'll be doing sessions and people's inner children come up quite a bit. And it doesn't necessarily always have to mean like a trauma. It could just mean, oh, this was a pivotal moment where a lot of change was occurring at this point in your timeline, at 7 and 11. And that part of you has a message for you, And so, and then there's also the connecting in, like I'm talking about the energy of it. There's the connecting in through mediumship. Like, what is it to really make contact, And that's a whole other experience where you can really connect in a more visceral way. And I've lost track of what I'm saying, quite frankly.
All good. All good.
But there's lots of ways to go about it. It's an exciting, there's a lot to explore.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to come back to you, Susan, with that exploration that you did with Ellie on this journey, and also with the things against us as well. What is the future for the things against us?
I mean, I don't know. I love working on this play
Things
with
are against us.
Yeah. So I hope for the things that are against us is that we can keep exploring this show. I mean, it hasn't had like a New York production. But I think that there's something that's so fun about this play on Zoom and the way that it was manifested. But I think that this play is very electric in person, where we can share the same space, because there's a kind of almost communion where a lot of plays aren't necessarily scary. And I actually think that's a mistake, because there's so many horror films, but in theater, like, you're actually physically in the space. So as an audience member, you're much more vulnerable in a way. And so when we did the show at like Washington Ensemble Theater, there's a whole part in the play where it's like you drink the tea, you eat the cake, and you're almost kind of like, the Persephone, like you're almost kind of like inhabited, infected by the house. You're sort of the world once you take these things. And so we had in the lobby, we had tea and cake when you got your tickets in the reception. So you would sort of have it before you knew what this play was. And then I kind of wanted to feel like the house like just takes over. And so the first couple of rows, we had the carpet from the set go up the stairs, in terms of the risers. And then the first row were sort of like armchairs. And so I think that's the dream for this play. For me, is just and not necessarily that exact same concept in terms of another production, but just to continue to play with that world and explore it, and just sort of have fun with how to create this world in terms of the audience. And like, for those reading the script, I mean, Denise, you mentioned that there are footnotes in the script. There are almost like newspaper like headlines. There's images. And so there's a part of this play that's never totally meant for the audience to receive. So it's a very different experience to read it than to see it. And I think there's a lot of different ways to sort of like stage it and see what it's like. So my hope is just to continue to see all the different versions that it could be.
I'm excited for the day to see it in person and see the next iteration. So this week, next week coming up is going to mark a year that we have been in lockdown with COVID-19 and the pandemic, and all that this year has brought for all of us. With this theme of unearthing our past and the things are against us, what have you all unearthed about yourselves this year? I know that might be a bigger question, but if you can give a small answer about what you've unearthed about yourself this year in reflecting. Whoever wants to take the mic as our closing question.
I will say that when the pandemic struck, I was making a show on a cruise ship that had a cast of like 70 people, and we had to be like evacuated from the ship. And I felt like the first couple of months, I literally felt like I was going through withdrawal. And it was a kind of like, it was like my adrenaline was a drug. And what it was to work in the theater had kind of like fried my whole nervous system. And I feel like it is an earth stillness for me. And that from that stillness has come depth and an awareness and a precision that I didn't know was missing. And feel like as things start to open, I am really interested in that question of I actually really like the person that I am right now, like a lot better than I liked the person I was a year ago. And how can I keep bringing that forward?
Thanks, Ellie. Does anyone else want to take that? Same question about what you unearthed in this past year about yourself.
I will say that, well, two things. An answer came to your last question about energy. I just have to, it's the teacher in me. I invite people to journal with their own energy systems and get answers in that way to see what comes up that could be released. And for me, it might be a little bit my age, but something is happening where this last year, I've actually had my business has grown quite a bit, and a very nurturing aspect of myself has developed where, my desire is always that this is for people's highest good, but like I am really feeling like love and compassion in a new way, and a lot of just like, man, we're all doing our best. Well, maybe not all of us, not everyone here, we're doing our best in the world. And yeah, so I would say I've unearthed a kind of nurturing energy that feels very maternal towards people, very loving. And I get angry easy. So, it's, I'm not floating down the street, but it's been nice. It's been nice to touch into that from a place of desperation.
All right, cool. I appreciate it. Well, I've deeply enjoyed speaking with all of y'all and hearing from all of y'all, your amazing journeys and everything you've contributed to this conversation. Thank you so much.
What have you unearthed? Do you want to answer that?
Way to get it back on you. It's what happens. If you say, ask the question, can you take the heat? It actually comes back to kind of what you said, Victoria, was a lot about inner child work for myself and like really understanding how several of us talked about, like, how does that intergenerational trauma and joy manifest more in who I am? So yeah, which is why I was super excited to talk to y'all. So thank you. Thank you all for all that you do and for continuing to make the way for new futures. So everyone stay safe, take care. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. If you'd like to watch The Things Are Against Us, you can please turn into MCC On Demand and you can watch the production there and subscribe. Thank you all so much for joining us. Have a great night and stay safe.
Thank you.